quicker for that and will fought out a little bit harder than I would a kid just because we didn't win the city championship in the state. It'd be nice to win those things, but most important, be able to put those kids in a situation where you're able to go get your degree and hopefully get it paid for free or limited to nothing. That's my trophy. That's my reward.
Mm-hmm. With that, you know what? I totally agree with that. That's a wonderful thing, and I'm gonna expound on that a little bit later. How the propaganda that's being fed to the general public is these guys are spoiled, they're pampered, they get their way. How often are you running into kids that are teetering on the edge of quitting and feeling left out?
That's every day in our community. I work in the Inglewood community, and I still live in the Roseland community. But I tell kids every day, even when they're not on the team, just walking through, just going to the park. A lot of people just, hey, coach, and just know who I am, either from TV or just around in the community. And I always just have a word, just try, just try. If you don't think you're good, just try. It's always, easy to quit. It's always easy to give up. And I just tell them, hey, you need to go try. If you give it a chance, it may work. When I met John Taylor, he was a perfect example of that. He had 33 missed days of school. Hated school. He hated school. But he ended up moving back into Chicago because he was living in Indiana. He ended up moving back into Chicago, and he was, ineligible for a year, and he had to sit out. It was the most troubling thing because it was easy for him to quit because he had already been out of school for 33 days anyway. And just going to him and being able to tell him, hey, man, you really got a chance if you just try. He ended up trying. He went on to Mott, JUCO. He had ended up winning the National Player of the Year. He ended up winning the JUCO National. He went on to Fresno Pacific. He led the country in scoring his junior year. He got invited to the top 100 in the country for the NBA tryouts. He ended up going overseas and still plays overseas to this day. Has never worked a job. Basketball has fed him and his family. And just because he tried and he didn't give up, that's an inspiration to me. I can't touch everybody's lives, but I can always tell that story how I touched his life and changed his life when he had given up.
But you know what? I think when you tell that story, you immediately would inspire. If you told that story to 100 kids, I honestly believe 25 of those kids won't give up. Just like I think it goes along with the premise that all these kids in the top 100 believe that they're going to be NBA players. Now, it's only 450 jobs, but you think you're going to be that one. So I believe if you keep telling that story, you will affect way more people than even you will even know. Even if it's not in sports, it'll be throughout life. Even on this show, the reason I say that, I'm a walking testament to that. My coach, the very first coach that ever had an impact on me was this guy named Jimmy Fields. He's on the west side of Chicago. And on this show, I use things that Jimmy Fields said. I haven't seen Jimmy in 30 years. I haven't laid eyes on Jimmy Fields in 30 years, but it's things that he quote. There are things that I've said on this show that have had impact on either co-hosts or people who call, and it is directly from Jimmy Fields. So, Coach, like I said at the top of the show, you guys are the fathers that we didn't have. You guys are our inspiration, and we work hard in order to achieve what you guys, it's this African proverb that states the eyes can see everything but themselves. You guys are the eyes that are seeing us. And I'm going to thank you again, and the parents are thanking you, and the community is thanking you. And the reason I want to expound on that other point later, I want to go into, you mentioned getting these kids in school. One of the things that, the big topics of the day is paying these kids for education. How do you feel about that? Paying these kids for basketball, and instead of just saying they're getting an education.
Well, I have mixed feelings about that. because some kids truly have really hardship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that should be taken into consideration, where you're coming from, what's your background. And the reason why is because I find that when these kids go on some of these institutions, they still end up leaving out with debt. And if they can have some type of process of applying for funding or applying for financial compensation, that avenue should be there. Everyone is not going to be able to get a scholarship, as I spoke earlier. Everyone is not going to get zero debt. But those kids should get an opportunity to say, hey, we didn't have a full Pell Grant. We don't have the finance in our community, nor any grants that can get us through. Can we apply financial compensation? And I think in certain cases, if you qualify and they set great criteria, I think kids should be open to it. I don't believe that we should have a one-shot approach. If you don't get a scholarship or you don't get any grants, you just out of luck and just have to take loans for the rest of your life. I just think everybody can't pay back loans, even when entering back out of into the workforce. I pay student loans, and student loans shoot up almost 30% of my paycheck. And I had more hardship trying to live after leaving college than I did in college. And I think if those things were taken care of and those things were supported financially from some other type of institution or some type of compensation, I think I probably would have stayed longer and got my master's.
That, and you know what? Please expound on the fact that even when you get a scholarship, at times it's not a full ride scholarship, because when people hear scholarship, they automatically think, I got 4 years paid to school and I don't have any. I'm gonna eat and I'm gonna live free and I'm gonna graduate. Please help the listening public understand that that's not always the case.
No, that's absolutely not the case. A lot of those scholarships are year to year. Their tendency on GPAs, their tendency on your production, academically, on and off the court, behavior-wise. And there are even situations where young men will go to school and they will break or violate one of those rules, but yet they still have to pay that loan or they have to pay that money back to that institution for violating that contract or breaching that contract. And often that becomes a hardship. We often hear about NBA guys who go broke, and we also hear about guys that go to the institution and so forth, because a lot of those safety nets that were given or up under them when they were in good grace and good situation, they were able to be in a good place. But when it comes against hard times, or you come across a situation in life where you have challenges and you can't get through with it, you resort to anything else and it doesn't work out, it becomes tough, and removing those things can be critical. It can very well cost you, the rest of your life in Department of Correction, or in some cases, it's cost some kids that I've even coached their very own life.
Wow. See, and that leads me directly into the next question, which I personally feel that when we are, most institutions that we're guiding our children into, they have medical schools. And when you have a medical school, you should have a psychiatric program. I think part of the scholarship or the NCAA or these institutions should start involving counseling with some of these young people. As I mentioned with my last three guests, like you come from Roseland, I come from just north of Old Town, which is also the Cabrini Green area. I can remember times, and I've told the story 1,000,001 times. I can remember times me and my buddies on our way to a restaurant and saying, hey, man, let's hurry up because they're going to start shooting in 25, 30 minutes. That can create a PTSD kind of situation. How do you feel about hopefully trying to get or pushing towards some type of counseling or what have you for our young people when they go to these institutions, because they're probably in shock. I know it's culture shock for one, and they're probably still in shock from the environment that they grew up in. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm definitely in agreement that for 4 years it should be offered to all students. As a child, we've all faced some type of trauma, and trauma is real. Trauma is real, And, you know, I lost my father 2 weeks before I went away to college. And I went on a college tour. And when I went on the college tour, I was just picking out, you know, hey, I want to go to school. Yeah, I was excited. And they never told me that my father had passed while on the college tour. So when I'm getting off the bus, you know, I see my whole family there. We leave off the bus and go straight to the funeral home because they had been holding him a week and a half before we even had his funeral because they were waiting on me to get back. Because they said my mother said if you tell him that his father's died, he won't get on that bus. He'll never go to college. And because I got on that bus and went to college, it's always still been traumatic to me to know if I didn't get on there, you know, I probably wouldn't go to college. And based upon when I went away to college, I needed a lot of counseling. I needed a lot of support. I needed a lot of mentors in order to get through. I didn't have that counseling available to me, but I kept that in, and I still keep it in at times. I kept that in for 4 years, being able to trying to adapt to losing someone that close. I had never lost anyone in my life. Never lost a cousin, a niece, nephew, but then to lose your father 2 weeks before you go away to college was traumatic. And just simple things like that. And, you know, in our community where we grow up at, you know, people are dying every day. You know, if that's not trauma, you know, I don't know what else we're dealing with. You know, it hits home every week, every day. You know, several ball players that I've coached. I coached Jonathan Mills at North Lawndale, who died in a swirl of violence. I coached Saeed Ivy. He died in a swirl of violence. So you sit back and you wonder, man, you know, are those kids who left in those programs getting adequate counseling? And the answer is no. You know, sometimes it takes behind the scene to get those kids through it. And we're not certified, we're not qualified, but I've seen many times that the coaches had to wrap around kids and tell them that, you know, I love you. You know, I don't have these clinical things that can help you, but to know that I'm here and know that I love you, you know, was powerful and it was good enough to help those kids through because they trust us, you know. You know, I've seen kids, you know, just trusting coaches, and that was good enough, but it wasn't enough really for that kid when those coaches were not around. They truly needed some counseling, and they truly needed some support because they have to then now go out of state or they have to go back out of country again, and that coach that you trust and love won't be there.
Thanks. And that's my point, because I look at this like you look at the domestic violence rate with athletes. You look at people making horrendous mistakes when they're on campus. A lot of this acting out, or even just violence between teammates. Like the young man in the national championship game last year, he's trying to fight a coach on the sideline in the biggest game, potentially the biggest game in his life. The whole world watching you act the fool. That's not because you are a ill-mannered person or you have zero self-control. We just look at him. He acting a fool. There has to be a deeper thing than just, I'm so angry in the middle of a football game, I'm ready to fight a coach. I'm sorry. I just don't believe that that's what's going on in the 18, 19, 20-year-old young man's mind, especially in the middle of a game. So I do believe instead of just pimping these kids out, I believe we have to start talking to these institutions. If we sending you to it, do you have counseling for this young man? Because not because he has an outward problem, but he just may need to talk. Like you said, sometimes you just need to just know somebody actually cares. And like you said, the coach told you can do this. Or when you tell players that they can do things, they know, man, Coach Jones got my back. And Jimmy Fields had my back. Willie Green had my back. Fred Thomas had my back. Roy Kenyatte had my back. Mr. Butler had my back. These are guys in and outside of Westerhouse. Mr. Jordan, I didn't even go to Lincoln Park High School, and Mr. Jordan had my back just in my community. So those are people, again, I mean, I cannot express enough when I talk to guys like you and Coach Thorpe and in the future, Nick Irvin. I just want you guys to understand the impact. I know you guys know, but sometimes, just like you said, kids need to hear that you care. I want you to know that players and people in the community, they may not be walking up to you and saying, Coach Jones, we really appreciate it, but trust me, it's a mother